What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Dad Cave podcast. Um, Last time we posted an episode, we talked about the direction of the channel, and I'm finally here today to solidify everything. So I know I talked about like scheduling and how we're gonna do things. That's all fine and dandy when you have an idea of what you want to do, but the execution and putting into practice um, is what's important, right? Like um, the actual physical. I don't want to call it labor, but like working on content, posting it, staying consistent is where it can become difficult. So I did bite off a little bit more than I can chew in regards to not having posted anything since that previous podcast episode. But now, clearer horizons are in the midst of our sight, and I can confidently and comfortably say that September is going to be a big month for us. So I live in the northeastern Pennsylvania area. My kids are actually starting school this week. So we're starting to get back into the routine of things, not only them as kids, but myself as a parent, as an adult. I do thrive on that structure that I get from school. I know a lot of the times, um, as parents, school is important for so many different things, but the structure and the routine to me is the most important part of school. 2 months of summer, everything kind of goes AWOL and crazy and haywire, whatever cliche you want to use to describe what summer vacation is like for young kids. You can apply that here, right? And we had a lot of fun. We played a lot of games. We had a lot of unorganized sleep schedules, which to me is a big thing. And that does take away from the time I can get to myself as an individual, right? I'm a dad and a husband before anything else. Like, I love content creation. I love streaming. I love having conversations about hobbies that I might have or nerd culture. But first and foremost, I am a husband and a father. And that is going to supersede any desire that I might have to um, post on YouTube or whatever. And I'm not going to apologize for that. And I don't think anybody should. But I also think it's important to make sure that you make time for the things that you enjoy doing on a personal level. It's a nice way to detach from everyday responsibility. It's a nice disconnect from the stresses of adult life. So, what we have planned is we have our Dad Cave episodes that we're going to be posting once per month. Now, I've decided, as you'll see when this episode gets posted, that our Dad Cave episodes are going to premiere on the last Wednesday of every month. Sometimes it's going to be the fourth week, or I should say, sometimes it's going to be the fifth week. Most of the time, it's going to be the fourth week of the month. So there's going to be a monthly, end of the month kind of wrap up and what to look forward to moving into the next month. Now, hopefully, after you guys are finished with this episode, um, you'll have other things to look forward to, and that's what I mean by September is going to be a big month here. So the way I'm going to lay it out is how I originally planned. Right, I'm going to do Monday and Friday. I'm going to resume. I'm going to reserve Mondays and Fridays for Magic the Gathering content. So the bulk of the Mondays will be Monday Night Brawl, which will be arena digital client for Magic the Gathering, just gameplay videos on that. And then Friday Night Magic will be actual, you know, paper Magic using Convoke, which is the web browser that my friends and I use, my playgroup and I use to play Magic the Gathering. So I already have all of that stuff like in the works. I'm just finishing up edits on them and getting ready to launch them. Now, the Wednesdays that there is not a Dad Cave episode will be reserved for the bigger projects that I'm working on. We've already talked about the Retro Rewind, and we have Chrono Trigger um, in the barrel, in the chamber, ready to be unleashed. That's going to be coming in September as well. But I was also able to do a playthrough of Sea of Stars, and that's another project I have planned as well. So as far as the roadmap for September, Mondays and Fridays are always going to be reserved for Magic the Gathering with Monday Night Brawl and Friday Night Magic. And then Wednesdays are going to be, like I said, the other stuff. So in September, we're going to have the premiere finally of our Chrono Trigger episode for the Retro Rewind, as well as an episode for Dad's Approval, which is my name that I gave my reviews or non-spoiler reviews for non-retro games. So we already did one of those for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So I just decided I'm going to call it Dad's Approval. Now, the whole purpose of Dad's Approval is to just give a spoiler-free review of a game that I enjoyed and that I played through, and that hopefully the insights that I provide will have somebody curious enough to try it for themselves, right? So that's kind of going to be more along of a generic review, non-spoilery, of course. I don't like to spoil things that people haven't experienced for themselves. I understand older games. You can kind of do it anyway because, like I said, Sea of Stars is 2-3 years old now, so I'm sure most people who wanted to play it or were interested in playing it have played it. But then again, I look at somebody like me who Sea of Stars is definitely a game that I would have been interested in had I known about it when it first came out, but I didn't. So I just found out about it this year when they did the Android port for it, which is what made me play the game. So I'm glad that I didn't know anything of that game going into it, because I feel like I was able to enjoy it and experience it for myself. So that's why I do value non-spoiler reviews. But what I will say is this: if at any point in time you guys watch a review, whether it was Clair Obscur Expedition 33 or Chrono Trigger, Sea of Stars, these upcoming reviews that I'm going to be doing, if at any point in time you want to go into a more in-depth or more like peel back the layers of the onion type video, just let me know in the comments. I have no problem doing that. I have no problem releasing a non-spoiler review video just for those who are interested and maybe haven't decided to jump in with both feet yet. But I also have no problem doing a full-on spoiler review for those who are interested in that type of content as well. And it's easier for me because I'm essentially double dipping into something that already exists, right? So this is going to be more of like a open for interpretation kind of approach to the YouTube channel, right? Like, I'm not saying that I'm relying on people to tell me what videos to make, but I'm also not going to shy away from somebody who's, even if it's a one-off comment, like, hey, I really loved your video on X. I'd love to see what your thoughts are about this. There's many different ways of doing that. I can answer it. If somebody asks me a specific question about Chrono Trigger that I didn't touch on in my review for it, I could do a short, I could do another, there's so many things, right? So, I don't want this to be like the end all be all, right? I want it to be kind of like a community where people feel comfortable consuming content, and people feel comfortable asking questions that they might not have asked somebody who has a bigger following, because they might feel like it's a stupid question. I don't come from that camp or train of thought. I don't believe in stupid questions. I think everything has a valid point, and it's also about perspective, right? Like, I might see some things differently than a certain individual, or I might be wrong about a certain topic, or I might have missed a detail about something that I'm trying to explain. And for the most part, like, I'm educated enough on these topics of conversation. Like, I'm not doing a review of Chrono Trigger without having played the game. So I'm still, you know, exploring it for myself. I'm recording all my own footage. I'm not using stock footage or anything like that. The only stock footage I might ever use is like cutscenes and stuff like that. But as far as like gameplay, it's going to be all my own gameplay. Um, but yeah, that's basically what we have lined up for it, and then we'll kind of see how it goes. I mean, I have a couple of ideas of things I want to do. Um, if you guys have tuned into my TikToks, you saw, which is like the main thing I want to talk about today because I haven't really got into it, the Gen 1 Pokemon recompilation project. This has kind of been everywhere. Like everybody's been playing it. It's gone mainstream. It's kind of incredible how talented people are. Like if you would have said to me a couple months ago, "Hey, you grew up playing Pokemon, right?" Yeah. Well, what if you were able to play it in like a 2D HD 2D? I would have said, "Sign me up." Like, why? Are you kidding me? So as soon as I found out about it, I just thought it was incredible. And they're now to where it's at. Like, there's so many mods for it now that it's just essentially you can turn it into the most ridiculous Pokemon game ever, which I think is hilarious, right? But also I do like the fact that you can still hit on those like purist beats. Like I'm more of a purist when it comes to retro gaming. So yeah, I do have mods installed on my Ein Thor to play I'm playing actually Pokemon Yellow in the recomp project. I have my own mods. Like I have the voxel mod. I have a couple of quality of life mods like you know, easy catch so I never miss catching a wild Pokemon. I have like unlimited rare candy, so I don't have to grind too much. Um, so I have stuff like that. But as far as like the presentation of the game, I pretty much have it in the style that Yellow was built in. Like it's old school. Like I don't have any 3D sprites. I did change the sprite work to the Pokemon Crystal sprites because even though Pokemon Yellow did a much better job of doing these sprites than Red and Blue, I still feel like there were still a couple one-offs there that were kind of wonky. But Pokemon Crystal, especially for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color era of Pokemon, has the best sprites. So I'm using the Pokemon Crystal sprites, um, and it's nice. It's just nice to see that journey through Kanto again in its original presentation with like a modern coat of paint on it. Like I really have been enjoying it. The game's super easy. Like Pokemon is just in general a pretty easy game. It's never been um excuse me, it's never been something that's been super challenging for the most part. I mean, unless you're getting into like difficulty hacks or ROM hacks, it's never been something that's like, oh my God. But there are things like it's very slow, so like traversing through Kanto is slow, but they've added running shoes, which is nice because it speeds it up a little bit. You can also just speed up your frame rate pacing so you're not running at like whatever a potato would run. Um, it's just nice. Like you're like it's cool to see, especially now. Like I've noticed recently, there's a lot of things happening. Um, I shouldn't say there's a lot of improvements to things happening now that I grew up with that were so important to me when I was a kid. So, for example, obviously we talked about Magic the Gathering. I've always been a huge card game player. Like I've always been super interested in TCGs. I've always played some type of card game. Yu-Gi-Oh was my first real entry into the TCG space, like competitively. But I've dabbled in Pokemon. Obviously, play Magic. Um, I played Digimon competitively for a while. I played Dragon Ball Super, the card game, for a long time competitively before it branched off into two different games. And, so I've always kind of been involved in the TCG space. But when I was a kid playing Yu-Gi-Oh, early on, TCGs weren't really that popular. Like you had Magic, you had Pokemon, and then Yu-Gi-Oh was like this third card game that just kind of came up out of nowhere, and because it was based off of a popular anime, it took off. And now, of course, you're talking about big three when it comes to card games, but there have been so many different additions into that card game space. Like, you had Naruto card games, which is another Naruto card game is coming out now. You've had, like I said, Digimon, Dragon Ball, multiple iterations of Dragon Ball games. You've had multiple iterations of Marvel and DC card games. You've had a Bleach card game. You've had so many different card games that have failed. Transformers was another one. And now, like, there's such an influx of trading card games, competitive trading card games in the space. And for the most part, they're pretty successful. I mean, you have your big three. You're always going to have your big three: Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. But then you've got games like One Piece. One Piece, I'm not a One Piece guy. I'm not. I've never watched the anime. I've never read the manga. I don't really like the art. But it's hugely popular. One Piece is such a successful card game. It's collectible. It's playable. It's huge. Digimon was big for a little bit. Dragon Ball has two different card games. Gundam Wing has a card game now. They're coming out with another Naruto card game, and then you have all of the universes beyond stuff with Magic, like Avatar and Marvel and Final Fantasy. Even Final Fantasy has its own card game. It's just cool to see things that I enjoyed as a kid that were maybe not so cool becoming cool, right? Like I feel like that 90s era of guilty pleasures is coming into the forefront. And video games is up there too, because video games now are this huge multi-billion dollar industry. It's one of the most popular forms of media that you have in the world right now. But back when I was a kid, it was niche, right? Like, not everybody played video games. You got made fun of for playing video games. And I think as a millennial, I think our generation was the first generation to really like usher in that new wave of advancements in entertainment and technology. Like, I feel like a lot of millennials, I would say maybe like 75% of millennials are like either like casual gamers or gamers, like hardcore gamers. Like, I consider myself a hardcore gamer. Um, I mean, it doesn't take precedent over my entire life. I say hardcore because I play a lot of different games. I'm not like a competitive gamer or anything like that, not anymore. But I feel like our generation really ushered in that new entry into multimedia with gaming, and I feel like that is synonymous with Pokemon for some reason. Like, I always go back to thinking about what was like the biggest boom for gaming. I think Pokemon really had a lot to do with it. At the time, you had the anime, you had the card game, and you had the Game Boy games. And I think that was huge. I think a lot of people my age grew up playing Pokemon on the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and it just kind of led them into other things. Now, granted, I want to preface this by saying I've been gaming since before Pokemon. I did have a Sega Genesis. I had Sonic the Hedgehog. I was very lucky. I had a very good childhood when it came to that aspect. Um, I remember getting a Sega Genesis as my kindergarten graduation present. I'll never forget that day. The rest is history. Like, that was my first official home console, was a Sega Genesis. I remember I had Sonic 1 and 2. I ended up eventually getting Sonic 3. I had Vector Man. I had a couple of the Disney games like Lion King, Aladdin, Toy Story. Like, I had a couple of Sega Genesis games. And that was my console. Like, I didn't have a Nintendo. I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I had a Sega Genesis. That was my introduction into gaming as a kid. And then my second console after my Sega was a Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64 came out a little bit before PlayStation. So I had a Nintendo 64, but alongside my Nintendo 64, I had my Game Boy Color. And even though I had experience with the Sega Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog, I feel like the Game Boy era of games, like Game Boy Color, like Pokemon, really blew everything up. Everybody was playing Pokemon. Everybody was trading Pokemon on their link cables. everybody was surfing up Cinnabar Island, trying to get the missing no glitch to get unlimited rare candies. Like everybody was doing stuff like that. You could not go to a playground where kids were not, talking about what Pokemon they have in their game or talking about Pokemon cards or anything like that. You just couldn't. Like it was everywhere, and I think that helped kind of piggyback. Like Pokemon piggybacked its way into mainstream gaming. Now, uh, obviously, I think Game Freak has kind of lost touch a little bit. I'm excited to see what Winds and Waves is going to bring us, but I feel like Game Freak has definitely not um, prioritized quality over quantity since maybe Gen 4. So what is that? Diamond and Pearl. Everyone says Gen 5 is incredible. I really didn't like Gen 5. I like Gen 5. Like I think Black White and Black 2 White 2 were good games, but I just didn't like how limited you were. Like Pokemon has always been a game about we're going to include Pokemon from the previous generation and then just add a few more new Pokemon. Gen 5 completely took that and threw it out the window, and they were like, no, we're just going to make all brand new Pokemon, and you're only going to be able to use Pokemon from this generation. And some people really like that. Like, I personally didn't, because there's a lot of good Gen 5 Pokemon, but I feel personally, as far as like design philosophy, and I might get shit for this, but I feel like Gen 5 is one of the weaker gens. It definitely has I think it has the weakest starters, like Tepig, Snivy, and Oshawott. And then your final forms are Superior, Emboar, and Samurott. I would put any other starting lineup up against those three. And you might have a couple of misfits here and there. Like Gen 2, Chikorita gets shit on for being the worst starter ever, but Totodile and Cyndaquil are so strong that they kind of carry Chikorita out of it. So like you can't even say that Gen 2 has the worst starter pools because Totodile and Cyndaquil are so strong as starters. And even now forget it. Like now that Mega Meganium had a buff, like Chikorita is actually not even that bad of a starter anymore. But for Pokemon being Gen 5, like I really didn't vibe with that game the way I did with like Gen 2. Like I always talk about Gen 2 being my favorite gen. Like even though like my first Pokemon games were Red, Yellow, Blue, like I feel like I put the most hours into Gold, Silver, and Crystal, especially Crystal. Um, with the revamped graphics and updated set like quality of life and sprites and stuff like that, I feel like it was just great. And my favorite Pokemon game of all time, I think the greatest Pokemon game of all time is the Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I think those games are like perfect. Um, it fixes the issues of the original Gen 2, like with the level curve and stuff like that. So I feel like Heart Gold and Soul Silver are the best Pokemon games ever made. And that's saying something because it's essentially just a remake of Gen 2 on the Nintendo DS. Like it wasn't even 3DS. So you're talking about old. Like I think Heart Gold and Soul Silver falls into Gen 4. So now you're talking going into Gen 5. X and Y I thought was really good. I thought X and Y was good. Um, but I feel like that's when they started getting super easy. Like the accessibility of Pokemon at that time was just so, it was everywhere and it was so rinse and repeat that I felt like Pokemon X and Y were just really easy. And then Gen 7 with Alola I thought was great. I enjoyed Gen 8 Sword and Shield a lot. Scarlet and Violet was a little weak for me. I don't really. It's so funny because I think the idea of an open world Pokemon game on paper sounds great, but when you put it into practice, I don't think it's that great. Like especially because they changed so much fundamentally about the Pokemon formula in Scarlet and Violet that it kind of just defeats the purpose of any type of linearity at all. Like you can in Scarlet and Violet, you can literally traverse through the map like without even doing the gym challenge or the star bases or whatever they're called. And there's like there's no consequence to it. You could just do whatever the hell you want. I do think that some linearity in Pokemon games is important because it gives you that structure, like we talked about earlier with kids going back to school. It gives you that familiarity of, okay, I know I have to go through the gym challenge. I know there's going to be an evil team. Like that's nice, right? Um, and I feel like for the longest time we've always wanted an open world Pokemon game, but for some reason, I just don't think Scarlet and Violet did it that well. I think Legends Arceus um, did a great job of an open world Pokemon game. I don't think that game is what people were looking for. I think Pokemon Legends Arceus is a great entry into the franchise, but I don't think people were looking for that game at the time. So they're kind of like not ready for what we got. Um, but circling back to what we were talking about earlier about the recomp, it's nice seeing something so old get love and like create a new wave of excitement. Like I was talking to somebody, I posted a TikTok about it, and somebody was talking in the chat in the comments saying, if only we can get something like this from a Game Freak. And I think there's a lot of weight to that because the simplicity of Gen 1 is being celebrated, right? And it's being improved. So, like, what if Game Freak never stopped improving Gen 1? Like, kind of treating it as if Pokemon is an existing entity, and then they just keep adding, like, I guess you can call them downloadable content or Battle Pass type mechanics to where they just add a couple hundred Pokemon every generation, but it's still the same game. So, that's kind of like what the Recomp project is, right? Like, you could play Gen 1, so you could play Red, Blue, and Yellow, but you can add in Pokemon from Gen 2 into Gen 1. It's still a Kanto region, which I think sucks. I don't like Kanto. Um, I'm more of a Johto and Hoenn kind of guy. Um, but again, that's a conversation for another day. But it's interesting to talk about how um, something as old as Gen 1 Pokemon is getting revisited and getting celebrated so heavily because it's what we've been asking for, right? And I think the whole point of this conversation, obviously I wanted to update you guys on what we're doing, but the whole point of this conversation is I wish people could go back to appreciating how beautiful simplicity can be. And that's with everything, but in specifics, talking about gaming, I had this conversation with the Batman Drew, my co-host for Materia Junction, which, by the way, if you guys aren't following Materia Junction on YouTube or Twitter, or not Twitter, YouTube or TikTok, please do so. We're posting a lot in there, and there's a lot of really good community engagement. So I would love for you guys to be a part of that as well. Um, we talked about revisiting a simpler time. Like we're playing through a lot of the Final Fantasy games, and we're noticing that so many of the modern titles have taken things out that have kind of shifted the essence of the original games like to its core. And it's just interesting to see that when you have such this hyper focus on fidelity and how great the graphics look and all these modern updates to 30-year-old games, but then you go back and you play the simpler games and essentially they end up being better, right? Like specifically talking about Final Fantasy 7 because that's the one that's been remade. I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, but I still think the original is the better game. And that's crazy because that game came out in 1997. So I think it's nice to have all the bells and whistles, but look at something like Gen 1 Recomp for Pokemon. We're getting Generation 10 with Winds and Waves probably within the next year or two. And yeah, there's hype around it. Of course, there's always going to be hype around it. But I would not expect the hype and the excitement that the Gen 1 Recomp project is getting. Shout out to Brian the Boy. The guy's doing the Lord's work. I know he's working on Gen 2 right now. What I'm excited for is, being a part of the ROM hack and fan game community. I've experienced a lot of Pokemon ROM hacks and fan games throughout the years. If they ever do a recomp of Gen 3 and we're getting Emeralds style of recomps, it's going to be so interesting to see how we can incorporate mods to ROM hacks and fan games that are built on the Gen 3 engine. Like, could you imagine, for those of you who have played Pokemon Unbound, it's a fan game that's created and built in the Pokemon Emerald or Fire Red engine, so the Gen 3 engine. Could you imagine playing Pokemon Unbound with the 2D HD style with the voxel, dramatic voxel shapes mod? Like, could you imagine being able to add mods? And the ROM hacking and fan game community do a really good job of adding quality of life features into these games. But could you imagine? Like, I'm just thinking about it right now. Like, playing Pokemon Unbound in HD 2D would be so sick. Even something like a Radical Red, which is a difficulty hack, playing Radical Red in HD 2D would be awesome. So I just kind of wanted to get on here and give you guys an update of what's going on with the channel and let you know where I'm at with my gaming journey. I do appreciate the support. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and let me know in the comment section down below. Like, what do you think about, celebrating simplicity in gaming? Let me know if you guys are playing the Gen 1 recomps as well. I'd love to open this conversation up. With that being said, we're going to get on out of here. And don't forget to stay tuned and pay close attention to our drops that we're going to be doing in September. I'm really excited to roll out these videos to you guys. And I'm looking forward to hearing any and all feedback. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for stopping in, and we'll talk to you soon.